When a product fails, the boardroom's immediate reflex is to point fingers at the marketing team or blame a sudden dip in the economy. The data shows the failure usually happens long before the marketing campaign begins. The breakdown stems from unvalidated assumptions built directly into the foundational blueprint of the business model. Building a new venture requires operating in a state of extreme uncertainty. The standard metrics used to run a predictable, mature operation do not apply here. Securing a return on investment requires stepping into the role of a business diagnostician. You have to map the structural flaws on paper and fix them before committing millions of dollars in capital. This chart maps the three axes of risk every new venture must navigate. First, market risk measures if the customer actually requires this solution. Second, feasibility measures the technical capability to build it. Finally, viability measures if the product allows for positive cash flow. A stable business model exists only where all three dimensions overlap. The goal is to isolate the single riskiest assumption within this intersection and stress test it. Consider an industrial bakery seeking to pivot away from low-margin manufacturing. Their proposal is a 10 million baht capital expenditure to launch a direct-to-consumer, subscription-based meal replacement powder made from wolfia, a high-protein aquatic plant. To evaluate this proposal, we have to stress test their operational roadmap against our three dimensions of risk. We start by isolating market risk. The core assumption here is that office workers will abandon their established breakfast routines to drink a green, algae-based powder every morning. The project team focused entirely on the high-protein utility of the plant, assuming that functional benefits would override a customer's sensory experience. In reality, the grassy scent and unfamiliar texture of the powder create a massive behavioral barrier, leading customers to abandon the product after one novelty purchase. Relying on this unvalidated behavioral assumption structurally breaks the plan to scale. Producing a massive first batch guarantees excess inventory of a product the market rejects. Mitigation requires halting the 10 million baht scale-up. The process must be rerouted into a low-cost validation loop, utilizing blind taste tests and landing page pre-orders to gather actual consumer data. Mass production cannot begin until desirability data replaces executive intuition. Let's assume the taste tests succeed and the customer wants the powder. We move to the second axis, feasibility. This diagram compares the bakery's core competency, managing the overall equipment effectiveness of bread ovens, against the requirements of a freeze-drying and powder extraction system. Moving into a completely alien production technology guarantees a steep learning curve. The initial defect rates will spike, crippling the output volume required to sustain the business. This operational reality invalidates the plan to purchase and install the 10 million baht extraction machinery on day one. The model requires an open ecosystem approach. The bakery must outsource the initial production runs to an established manufacturing partner to bypass the learning curve and protect their capital. Leveraging external partners isolates the technological risk until the company achieves the volume necessary to justify internalizing production. With the product outsourced and desirability proven, we test the third axis, financial viability. Can this generate positive cash flow? The health supplement market is highly saturated, relying entirely on targeted social media advertising to build a direct-to-consumer subscription base drives acquisition costs to extreme levels. The viability of the model depends on a simple equation, the customer lifetime value versus the customer acquisition cost. As ad costs soar, the cost to acquire a single customer quickly outweighs the revenue they generate. This consumes the gross margin, starving the company of cash and dropping them into the valley of death before the subscription base can mature. Surviving this requires abandoning the pure consumer play. The mitigation strategy is a B2B to C pivot, selling bulk corporate wellness packages directly to human resource departments. This secures large upfront cash payments and drastically lowers the cost of acquisition. Structurally altering the revenue architecture is the only way to survive the initial cash flow drought. The 3D assessment provided a structural map to overhaul the project into a lean, validated, and cash-positive operation. Before funding any new model, it must pass a 5-point diagnostic. First, have you accurately isolated the single riskiest assumption in the entire project? Second, are your revenue projections built on hard, validated data, or relying on executive ego and the illusion of capturing a hypothetical market share? Third, Do you have a funded contingency plan to absorb the financial shock if early customer churn rates double your expectations? Fourth, are you hoarding the entire research and development burden, or are you utilizing ecosystem partners to share the technological risk? And fifth, does your corporate culture allow frontline workers to surface critical red flags without fear of retaliation? A business plan that fails to answer these 5 questions internally will not survive the open market. Mark Zuckerberg noted that in a rapidly changing world, the only strategy guaranteed to fail is not taking risks. Avoiding risk entirely is fatal, but undertaking unexamined structural risk is simply corporate gambling. The objective of business design is to deploy diagnostic tools to build a precise validation roadmap, distilling extreme uncertainty into calculated, executable milestones. In our next analysis, we will examine the exact steps required to execute that validation roadmap.